What's a celebration without tutties? How about National Tight Ends Day and the tight ends showing up and showing out? Cade Otton, especially with Tampa Bay and what they're dealing with injury-wise, leading the pack with 29.1 fantasy points. Kyle Pitts with 2 touchdowns on the day. Hey, Travis Kelce woke up. The guy got in the end zone for the first time this season with 25 fantasy points, and Arizona's it's one of their top pass catchers right there, Trey McBride, bringing in 21.4 fantasy points. And we now welcome in CBS Sports fantasy analyst Jamey Eisenberg. And hey, Jamey, I'm not sure if you celebrate or not, but happy National Tight Ends Day. The slogan given by George Kittle, it says, hey, where tight ends across the NFL are scoring touchdowns, and that statement rang true on Sunday. And we talked about this every single week, at least at the start of the season. It was an unusually slow start to the year for tight ends. Now, 14 different touchdowns by tight ends so far through week 8. Are guys like Travis Kelce, who had a season-high day and hauling in his first touchdown, and Mark Andrews with his 3rd straight game hauling in a score, are they now must-starts in your eyes?
Well, Kelce's always been a must-start guy. You know, even when he was struggling, you weren't going to bench him because you knew the potential, especially once they lost Rashee Rice a few weeks ago. So it's nice to see him, continue to reward fantasy managers with his performances the last couple of weeks, culminating with, his highlight day today, which I hope is just a sign of things to come. Really for me, it was about guys like Andrews and Dalton Kincaid and Kyle Pitts and the ones that we had some questions about. Could they continue to produce or at least start to produce? And that was nice to see, So like you talk about Andrews and his, starting to, give us a little bit of consistent performances. Kincaid's been sort of up and down. I do think Amari Cooper's addition last week will continue to open some things up for him moving forward. Really the one that I was excited to see, and it's the guy at the top, and that's Cade Otton, because we knew about the injuries last week for Tampa Bay with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And this was a guy that had 10 targets against the Ravens in that game where both guys got hurt. And it was, okay, he's going to be a potential must-start guy moving forward. And you saw it again in this game today, for their matchup against Atlanta. So is he going to get 10 targets consistently? Probably not, but Baker Mayfield threw 50 times, and this run game is a little bit suspect right now, so they might continue to throw the ball a lot, especially in Week 9 when they take on a very good run defense for the Kansas City Chiefs. So Cade Otton is reaffirming our thoughts that he could be a must-start tight end, at least until Evans comes back, which might not be until Week 12.
All right, something to just keep your eye out on for Cade Otton and having an increase in production. But, hey, you know who else is back, Jamey? Tua Tagovailoa, and a slight semblance of what this Dolphins offense used to look like. Tua making his return for the first week since the most recent of his head injuries, but Miami's offense scoring the most points they had all season. 8 different pass catchers hauling in receptions. Can we go back to maybe fully trusting Dolphins offensive playmakers in that lineup or in their lineup? And I'm talking about Tua included.
I think Tua is going to be one of those borderline, QB1s. I was a little disappointed with his stat line today, but that goes to, Raheem Mostert scoring 2 short area rushing touchdowns. But I think the thing you look for is you just have faith in these guys moving forward. Now we start to nitpick them a little bit. So Tyreek Hill is going to be in your lineup no matter what. I think Devon Achane proved today he's going to be in your lineup no matter what. It really comes down to, can you trust Jalen Waddle? He's got 1 great game in Week 1 with Tua, but that was only on 5 targets. And today he comes back, he has 4 targets. So we need to see a little bit more volume for him until I think we could say Jalen Waddle is completely back to being the guy that, had a 100 catch season in his rookie campaign, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons with Tua. But at least in the case of Devon Achane, you saw a lot of volume in the passing game in that Week 1 game against Jacksonville. You saw a lot of volume in the passing game and a receiving touchdown in the game against the Cardinals. He was a breakout candidate for the season. He disappointed in the games where Tua wasn't there, at least to the expectations of what he was coming into the year. And like you said, with Tua back, it just makes everything look better for this Dolphins offense. It opens up the playbook for Mike McDaniel. And so no matter who they're facing, you're starting Achane, you're starting Tyreek Hill, Raheem Mostert's in the RB2 flex conversation. Remember, this is a guy last year that led the NFL in rushing touchdowns, tied Christian McCaffrey for total touchdowns with 21, 18 rushing touchdowns. He gets 2 rushing touchdowns today. You got to feel pretty good about what Raheem Mostert looks like as well when Tua's back under center.
Absolutely. It seems like that offense can actually start churning and start moving down the field. You see when Tua's there and when he is healthy. But, hey, Jamey, while 1 player returned on Sunday, 1 left the field. Stephon Diggs exiting Sunday's game after suffering a non-contact injury in the 3rd quarter. He did eventually walk off on his own will, but this Texans offense already operating for the time being without Nico Collins. Texans still pulling out the victory, but what's your outlook on Houston's offense where we stand?
I'd be very surprised if we see Stephon Diggs in Week 9. They play Thursday night against the Jets, and so if it's a knee injury of any significance, they're going to hold him out. This is a team that's still looking at the AFC South division as probably the best team in the division, and a team that we know came into the season with Super Bowl aspirations. So with Nico Collins at least still one more game away, with Stephon Diggs now dealing with again, uncertainty of what the knee injury could be. And look, CJ Stroud has struggled. He was my starter of the week this week, and he disappointed. He was one touchdown away from having a solid outing. And he played better than he did last week, clearly, because he was miserable against the Packers. But the offensive line's beat up right now for the Texans, not performing at the level that we thought. The receiving corps is clearly banged up right now. It's Joe Mixon's offense. He's been awesome when he's been on the field for them. We know he missed some time earlier this year with the ankle sprain. So as long as Mixon's there, he's the catalyst. And then I think we'll just see, CJ Stroud have to lean on guys like Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz. We'll see if Robert Woods, for example, steps up and helps this passing attack. But in terms of who you're starting, it's Joe Mixon without question. It's probably Tank Dell, and certainly in 3 receiver leagues and hopefully 2 receiver leagues, he continues to produce like he did today, finding the end zone. So hopefully it's not a long-term injury for Stephon Diggs. Hopefully Nico Collins is back soon. But this offense would look like a complete strength in the receiving corps. Clearly a little bit depleted right now.
I got to just follow up on that just a bit. Just for those owners that do have CJ Stroud, you talk about being without 2 of his playmakers potentially looking ahead to Thursday, and then you talk about it being Joe Mixon's offense. Essentially, what's your comfort level in starting CJ Stroud next week?
It's low. Again, last year Nico Collins was the best receiver for the Texans. The start of this season, Nico Collins was the best receiver for the Texans. But it was also, okay, now he gets this other still guy that can make plays and certainly has outperformed the expectations in Stephon Diggs. And Tank Dell has underperformed. But when you have those 3 receivers working together, you see the upside of what CJ Stroud can be. You take those guys off the field, you're still talking about a good Jets defense. I know they've underwhelmed as well. But 2 guys I think that I would start over him this week would be Bo Nix. He's got a great matchup against the Ravens. I know that sounds funny to say, but he's playing better than CJ Stroud recently. And then I'll take my chances with Jameis Winston right now. Coming off the game he had against the Ravens, it's a much tougher opponent for him taking on the Chargers, but it's YOLO Jameis Winston, and whenever he's out there, you got the potential of some big games. So CJ Stroud's struggling right now. He's not a must-start fantasy quarterback.
Okay, let's talk about those 2 quarterbacks that you just named, because they were kind of like some unlikely heroes having big days. Bo with a 4-touchdown day, Jameis leading the Browns to their 2nd win of the season. You say maybe with CJ Stroud maybe having a questionable matchup this week. Okay, let's look beyond that. Is it safe to trust both Nix and Winston long-term going forward, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know long-term. I think it's more of a week-to-week thing. And, let's give our projections, Sports Line, some credit. They had Bo Nix as the number 4 quarterback for the week, and my colleague Heath Cummings had Bo Nix as a top 12 quarterback. I liked him as a sleeper. I just didn't have him ranked that high. So those 2 entities very high on Bo Nix, and he delivered. And look, he's making plays with his legs. He's finding the end zone. 4 touchdowns today. Finding different playmakers, and it was good to see Cortland Sutton get going. So I think just given the matchup against the Ravens, who could not stop Jameis Winston and came into the week top 3 in most fantasy points allowed to opposing quarterbacks, it might be time to buy into Bo Nix short term, and then as it continues, it might be a long-term situation. You just don't feel comfortable about not having a premier pass catcher and not having necessarily the consistency that we like to see. But right now, he is performing at a high level, so you might want to make that pivot. And then in terms of Jameis Winston, we know his history. Look, he's coming off a strong game today against Baltimore. Again, I think the matchup sort of played into that. But we are seeing some playmakers emerge. David Njoku, when it's not been Deshaun Watson, he's put up big numbers last year with Joe Flacco, right now with Jameis Winston. And Cedric Tillman in the 2 games without Amari Cooper, 8 for 81 last week, scores 2 touchdowns today, big performance across the board. So he might be a legitimate playmaker that fantasy managers can rely on. So with the way that Jameis Winston operates, where it's just I don't care mentality, you'll have some turnovers, you'll have some poor play. Again, Chargers defense has been good, but I just think the way that Jameis has the ability to produce, I will buy into that if I need a quarterback for week number 9.
All right, some names to maybe keep a lookout on if available on your waiver wire. But all right, Jamey, we cannot talk Sunday football without us discussing some winners and some losers from the day. So let's start on the positive side of things. Jamey, give me your biggest winner from what you've seen so far in week.
I'm going to go Ladd McConkey, just somebody we haven't talked about. He has 6 catches, 111 yards, and 2 touchdowns. On 6 targets, and this is an offense that is begging for someone to step up in the passing game. And McConkey's had some good moments. It just hasn't been consistent. Justin Herbert's playing better lately for fantasy managers. He's obviously done a good job, really as a game manager, because we know what this offense wants to be. They want to run the ball. But at some point, they're going to have to open up the passing game, especially when they want to compete with some of the tougher teams in the AFC and prove to be one of the legitimate playoff contenders and maybe even Super Bowl contenders. And so I think as Justin Herbert continues to evolve in this offense, who's going to be the guy that he relies on. And for me, it was McConkey coming into the season. It's starting to look like McConkey is emerging in that role. And look, if he continues to find the end zone consistently, he's going to start to be a must-start fantasy wide receiver. So let's give him some credit and call him one of the biggest winners this week.
Yeah, put some respect on the man's name, as they say. All right, on the other side of this conversation, we have to talk, I don't want to call them losers, but who let you down in Week 8, Jamey?
Yeah, we'll call them disappointments. Davante Adams just has not lived up to the expectations since he's joined the Jets the last 2 weeks. And he did have a little bit of a tough matchup with Christian Gonzalez. But I think anytime you say the name Davante Adams, who should be considered for the Hall of Fame, getting shadowed and shut down potentially by a second-year cornerback who is not, let's say, of the Patrick Surtain variety. I think Christian Gonzalez may get there one day. But I don't think you fear that type of player when you're talking about Davante Adams. I don't think that was the case with Aaron Rodgers, but we just haven't seen the targets go to Adams. We haven't seen the production, certainly from Adams in the 2 games with the Jets. And I don't know if he's going to live up to the expectations of what the Jets wanted him to be, and certainly what fantasy managers want him to be, while he's sharing the field with Garrett Wilson, who is proving to be still the #1 receiver for Aaron Rodgers and for fantasy managers. So I think looking at that game against the Texans, you're still probably going to consider him a borderline wide receiver too. We'll see how the rankings shake out by the time we get to Thursday night. But there's just not the same amount of confidence when we said, okay, Rodgers going from the Raiders, going to the Jets, being reunited with Aaron Rodgers, just not looking like that marriage is going to be the bountiful one that we thought it would be when the trade happened.
Yeah, when we talk biggest disappointments, I think we can talk about the Jets overall. You get Rodgers, you get Davante Adams, you have this defense, and for some reason can't quite make it work. As always, Jamey, we appreciate you stopping by for the insight.
Thank you.
And if you want more from Jamey, then you're going to want to check out the Fantasy Football Today podcast, where Jamey and the crew give you all of the best insight and tools to help you dominate your league. Make sure you download and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.